Hey everyone, welcome to this very special recording. This interview is with someone who is no longer with us, my dad. When I found out my dad had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, I wanted to interview him to make sure that there was going to be no questions left unasked and that I knew everything I could about his life, and also so that I could capture all of the wisdom and philosophy that he'd given me during my upbringing and my childhood, and hopefully be able to transmit some of that wisdom and philosophy to you guys. Because my dad was a man who was so full of insight and perspective, knowledge and wisdom that he gave me so much in my upbringing, and I hope that I can really transmit some of that insight, perspective, knowledge and wisdom to you all. So I sat down and I interviewed him about 7 weeks before he passed away. And I just asked him questions about his life story. We ran through from the moment he was born until the present day, till his new struggle with being diagnosed with terminal cancer and being given 6 to 8 months to live. And I finished by asking him some general questions on philosophy and what he felt he had learned from his life and the messages that he had for the future generation. Now, this interview lasted for about 3 hours. And I got so much personal value from it, hearing my dad's story and the things that he could impart and things I didn't know about my dad, or he'd told me in part but not in full. And it provided huge value to me, but I realized that maybe that won't transmit to the same value for you guys. Because my dad, bless him, had the tendency to ramble on, and once he started talking, you could never get him to shut up. So I appreciate that some of the stories, particularly just describing his life story, might not provide all that much value to you guys. So what I've done is I've cut the original interview and I've found the parables or little nuggets of wisdom that I feel are going to provide you guys with the most value. And naturally, because there is going to be a slight lack of continuity, because I've made these cuts, I'm going to have short explanations before jumping into the interview to explain, set any context that's required and say the question that I asked Dad and what I prompted him to talk about. So, without further ado, let's launch into this interview. And I began by asking Dad about his early life from the moment he was born. And my dad was born just before the outbreak of World War II. So his early childhood was characterized by bombing, rationing, blackouts. And one thing that he remembers in particular is this terrible fear of the dark that he had, because there weren't any lights during World War II. All these things got shut off so that the German bombers weren't able to find their targets so effectively. So we launched into this interview by Dad describing his fear of the dark and how he overcame it.
The most upsetting part of my early childhood was my absolute terror of the dark. I was absolutely fear-stricken, right? And I used to see these green posts, they're standing along the pavement. And it was only later on, when the war finished and they came along, they put these glass tops, I realised they were gas lampposts. Mm-hmm. But everything was sort of dark and things like that. And of course, me being quite probably sensitively attuned type of person. Now that fear of the dark lasted well, and I think I was probably about 17. And I remember reading this story in this book, and it said, "Do the thing that you fear to do, and the death of that fear is certain." Well, I lived in Donset Road, Aberdeen, and right next to it was Seaton Park, what we referred to as the Woodies. And I thought, right, if I can walk from there all the way around to Briggle-Lagownie, I'll cure my fear of the dark. And I made myself walk along past St Marcus graveyard. And to be honest, I can't remember too much about it, just having absolute terror. But then I got quite used to it until I approached the Briggle-Lagownie and I saw the light. And as soon as I saw the light, I just took to my heels and ran. and I came out to a place called Rocky Bank. And I remember walking home and thinking, oh, it's overjoyed, I've done it. I've walked through the woodies in the dark. Imagine me walking through the woodies in the dark. And there's like this voice inside my head saying to me, but you've got to do it again. And I ended up having this conversation with myself, or whoever this voice was, thinking, no way am I doing it, I've done it, I've proven it. So the next night, I thought, okay, I've got to go and do it again. And I walked through there, totally unafraid, and it had gone, right? So if I hadn't sort of faced up to my fears, the way that everybody else should face up to their fears, you realise they're only myths.
The next key incident in his childhood that Dad talked about was the death of his brother, my uncle, his brother Ian, who's actually, his name has been passed on to me, and Ian is my middle name in honour of my uncle. And my uncle passed away when Dad was only 10, and this had a really profound effect on my dad. And in the next section, he describes a little bit about why this was the case for him. While you were pausing for thought, there was a couple of things I wanted to touch on in your early life. Earlier on, you mentioned Ian, your brother, whose middle name passed on to me. I understand he died when you were quite young?
Yeah, I was only 10. Right? It's funny enough, Ian had gone to the grammar as well. Right? And he spent the last 2 years of his life in Wood End Hospital, which was a TB hospital in Aberdeen at the time. And then apparently, I found this years later from my younger sister Catherine, because Catherine was always with my mother, so Catherine knew a lot about what was going on, whereas me, I was always out, disappearing, and I'd be away all day sometimes. Right? I'd steal money out of my mother's purse, and I would travel to Peterhead and Turriff and Fraserburgh, and when I come home, my mother would say, wait, I've just been out playing. It's not very nice, but it's just this, and I was a dreadful thief. I used to steal everything, and lie, a bit, probably, I didn't see the film Walter Mitty, but I suppose I suppose a lot of children do that, they over-exaggerate certain things. But Ian, he'd spent, his life, so here when he was 16, and then he came out, and I remember how pleased I was. I thought, oh, Ian's at home, right? And then I came in from school one day, and Mrs. Fraser, she was like a second mother to. I actually called her Ma Fraser. She was in the house, and I thought, this is strange. Then my mother said, "So Ian's dead. Ian's died." And I remember saying, you're joking. Right? My mother getting really angry with me, thinking I'm joking with something like that. And Ma Fraser saying, oh, he doesn't understand, right? And I don't suppose I did in actual fact. But all through my younger life, when things ever got sort of hard for me and things like that, I would use my brother as a reference point, and I would say, Ian wouldn't mind going through what you're going through just now. Right? He never had the opportunity to go through all these sort of difficulties. Mm-hmm. So although he was dead, he did become a bit like a mentor.
So we're now fast forwarding a few years to the age of 18 in Dad's life. And at this point in his life, he had just made the decision to go and join the army. But soon into his tenancy with the army, he received some bad news, and he found out that his mother had passed away. And also in this period, only a couple months after, he also lost two very dear neighbours, Mr. and Mrs. Fraser, who were like adoptive parents to him. And in fact, he talked in the interview how if he'd had the opportunity, he would have moved in with Mr. and Mrs. Fraser rather than live with his biological family, with his parents. So he goes on to talk and reflect upon this feeling of loss and what this loss did for him at the age of 18.
so by the age of 18, I'd lost 3 parents, right? And my brother, right, when I was 10. You know, so being brought up in these sort of circumstances, but it does toughen you. But unfortunately, as it toughens you, it makes a crust around about you. So you sometimes hide the better part of yourself to enable, just to enable you to function in the real world. Now that I'm 75, what I'm trying to do is to unlearn everything that I've learned and get back to the person I was when I was a kid, which is really strange, isn't it? Right? Because in spite of it all, I really do think I was a better person then than what I am now. Right? I might know more from an experience point of view, but I feel, probably because I spent a lot of time on my own in the woods, climbing trees and being close to nature, I think I had a closer grasp to what life was all about than the artificiality that I see around about me today. Right?
So Dad went on to serve for 12 years in the army. He spent 4 years in Singapore and 8 years in Germany. And he experienced a lot of success in the army. He became the youngest ever warrant officer in the history of the British Army at that particular time. And he speaks very fondly of his army days. He loved the discipline, the camaraderie. For me, at least in my interpretation of the way he spoke about it, it was like the family that he'd never really had and the sense of belonging that he'd never really felt during his childhood. And I believe for him, this is one of the happiest times in his life. And it was during his army days that he also met his first wife. And they went on to have 3 children, Doug, Alison, and Jacqueline, who are my half-siblings. So we spoke a lot about Dad's army days and kind of how his first marriage came about and speaking about my half-siblings. But a lot of that was just story. And I didn't feel that was going to provide a whole lot of value to you guys. But what I did ask was, from those 12 years, if he could summarize 2 experiences, one from Singapore and one from Germany, that really had an impact on him and kind of rose above the cream of the crop of all the other experiences he had. So he tells 2 wonderful stories that I found really poignant and really engaging, and I hope you will too. So let's get on and join Dad as he speaks about these experiences. Hate to kind of have to summarize your army days because they were clearly a very important time for you, and you've told me so many stories about them over the years. And in fact, last summer when I was up for your 75th birthday, you told me a story that you'd never told me before, and that was quite novel. And I can only wonder the things that you've done that you've never told me about. But if you could choose one story from your time in Singapore and your time in Germany, choose your favourite story or your funniest story, would you want to just share them briefly?
I think the biggest one in Singapore was what they call adventure training. And the colonel called us in and they said, right, why don't you go on this adventure training course for 10 days. And basically what it was, we went to a place in the middle of Malaya called Kuala Lumpur, and it was to build bamboo rafts and float 250 miles from Kuala Lumpur down to Pekan on the east coast. And it really was, coming from a country like this, to go into such primitive environment and build a raft, live in a raft. There were 4 of us, there were 4 Brits. I was Len Benton, who was a warrant officer, myself as a warrant officer, Corporal Warburton, and Ken, can't remember Ken's surname, right? There was a Malay guy who was a corporal, and we called him Joe because we couldn't pronounce it half the time. And then, it was at his behest that we just called him Joe. And there was a Malay, Chinese sergeant with us, and his name was Fred. And so you have 4 Brits, and then there's about another 6 things. But the thing that really got to me, and it's always stuck with me, bearing in mind that we were regular soldiers, we're used to discipline, we're used to being smartly dressed in uniform, shaving, cleaning our teeth, having showers. After 3 days, up in the jungle, we went totally native, right? We'd been given these water purification tablets, but we stopped using them. We stopped shaving, we kept cleaning our teeth, things like that, right? But it made me realise what a thin veneer of civilization we have. All the parlour games, and all societies, etiquette and things like that. It just goes by the board. And what it did was it reduced life to its basic. If you wanted to go to the loo, you just jumped in the river and held onto the raft, did whatever you wanted to do, and then climbed back on board, right? No toilet paper or anything like that.
Health
right?
and safety would go nuts with that.
Oh, definitely, right? And then you stopped off at certain villages, kampongs as we called them, and we got. There was always a little place, we'd go in there and have a drink and talk to the people and things like that. And then to see how they lived, there were no pavements, no lights, things like that. And these people have been living for hundreds of years in the jungle, right, with no access to medical facilities, certainly no supermarkets and things like that. But the thing that always struck me is how happy they were.
Mm-hmm.
The kids, the people, and they were always so laughing and friendly and things like that. And maybe this is what they should do with civilization now. It's just put them all into the jungle and learn how to live. Life should be growing. It should grow from the basic upwards. Shouldn't start at the top the way most people do. Mm-hmm. There is no foundation. This is what's wrong. There's no foundation to people's lives nowadays. In Germany, I suppose we went. I was only a corporal at the time, so I had 3 weeks holiday, so I worked for 2 weeks in the NAFI to get me enough money to go for a week's holiday, right? And then I had a little wee BMW 700 coupe, right? There was only Alison and Douglas at the time, and Alison was only about 5, perhaps 6 months old. And I'd seen the student prince, so I always wanted to go to Heidelberg. And I thought, right, we've got to just drive to Heidelberg. And you never thought anything of it, you just got a map. And off I went. And I didn't go by the motorways. I drove down to Luxembourg. And on the maps there, they had a green line alongside the road which meant it was a scenic route. So I just followed the scenic route down through the Mosel Valley, Trier, and things like that. And then of the second day, I was driving down, and it'd been a long, hot day and things like that. And we arrived at this village, beautiful name. It was called Hinterwaldental. And just as you came in, there was a guest house on the left. So anyway, I'd had enough of driving. So we stopped there for two days. And unbeknown to me, it was an area called the Pfalzerwald. And what it was, it's as though the land had collapsed. And you had all these little wee valleys and rivers and and what you thought was a solid stack of rock. When you were up close, you saw it was just a heap of pebbles all crushed together. So obviously it had been under the sea at one time. And anyway, and of course the weather wasn't all that hot. And what we were doing is we were camping out because we didn't have a lot of money and things like that. And of course it was raining, and Douglas had this starts me, and the two phrases always stick in my mind. It's raining, Daddy, rain, lorry, right? That was the sum total of his conversation. However, we were it's only about 20 square miles, and so I was exploring this, the area, and I was driving along this road, very secluded road. And this movement out the, caught my eye. All right? And there was a track, and there was something happening just at the edge of the wood. So I stopped the car and we said, let's go and see what all that is up there. So we walked along there, and it was absolutely amazing. Somebody had built like what you would call a fairy village that you might see in one of the Grimm's fairy tales, something like that, right? And it was and what it was, the stream ran down, and somebody had built a mill with a water wheel, and the water wheel drove all these wires, and the wires went to all the houses, and you had people, at the water pump, pumping up water. You had people chopping nails, but there was nobody for miles and miles and miles. No houses, nothing. So somebody just out of a kind of his heart had just built this village. And I thought, what an amazing, amazing thing for somebody to do and create, right, out of this wilderness, right? And it's not as though he was charging anybody, not like these theme parks and like that. Mm-hmm. And it had such a profound effect on me. So I should imagine those are the two, right? Probably I'll think about something later on.
There's always a few that I can add in at a later date.
Yeah.
So this... Okay, so we are speeding forward rapidly here. So leaving Dad at his army days, when he left the army, he went through a variety of insurance jobs. His dad passed away at the age of 30, and his 30s were a very uninspiring time for him, and he was really looking for himself and searching for himself after leaving the army, after leaving this family and the sense of belonging that I spoke about. But shifting forward through the decades, he eventually met my mum and, of course, had me. And my parents got divorced at the age of 4, and this was something that was very traumatic for me, and it was a struggle, and this is something that I talk about in other material. But moving on through my early childhood, Dad was always cultivating my exploration, cultivating my learning, and we would go on walks and we would visit places, and I've mentioned elsewhere how we used to listen to Wayne Dyer and Deepak Chopra everywhere we went in the car. So there was this cultivating of personal development and psychology and spirituality throughout my early years, and it was these early years that really put me on the path to where I am now and where I'm going now and what service I'm seeking to provide now. It all came from this very early personal development, that Dad cultivated in me. But we'll pick up my story at age 13, and as happens with so many teenagers, that's when things start to get difficult. And I had a variety of issues, a lot of emotional things stemming from the trauma of my parents' divorce, and that was something that I'd really struggled with. And I'd carried this throughout my childhood into my early teen years, and the whole transition from boy to man and primary school to high school had been a struggle for me. And I got to the point where I was very unhappy with my life, my environment, the way things were going, and I had taken to binge eating. And I absolutely ballooned in weight to the point where I got to age 13, and I weighed 17 stone. And at this point, Dad saw that I had stretch marks on me. I had stretch marks on me like I was pregnant. And indeed, I still have those stretch marks to this very day. They're scars, they're reminders of where I've been and how far I've come. But at age 13, we made a decision that together we were going to start to change things. And Dad talks about how we went through this process and all of the fundamentals and the principles through which we managed to cultivate this change. Do you want to talk about how things developed from there? Because I was a very shattered individual at that point. Self-esteem, confidence was down the pan. Social skills were terrible. Do you want to talk through how Again, a different parenting challenge. First, you had me as youngsters, a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old. Now you've got this 13-year-old just hitting the most turbulent period of anyone's life. How did you kind of
Well, I
find that?
decided we'd try and channel you, right? So we tried the cricket, right? You know, so the thing they try to do is they try to be supportful as possible, but you know, and as regards your weight, one thing I made up in my mind, there was no diet that got to come into it. And I said to you, right, look, just eat normally, exercise, and the weight will come off, right? And then that's when we started taking to the gym, right? Which is a channel for all of you, right? And we would still do what, right? But I tried to encourage you to develop your circle of friends, if you remember.
Mm-hmm.
And gradually you could see it expanding and things like that. And then, then you've just got to look, remember, you're trying to get rid of 3 years of wrong conduct. Right? So it's not going to happen.
Well, I'd say it took me about 3 years till I started feeling right again. Till I was about 16, and like as a 16-year-old, I still didn't have the self-esteem and the confidence that I maybe do now. But it was developing.
On discipline. Discipline's the thing that keeps you right, you see. Right? Now, if you remember, right, and I can't, but you'd be allowed out till certain times, depending upon your age. You had to be in at 9:30, right? And most of the time you're very good about it. Now if you're 5 or 10 minutes late, right, I wouldn't come down on you, I would just mention it to you, right? And you were very good from that point of view. And the thing about responsibility is, if you want to teach people responsibility, give them responsibility. Right? My attitude towards it, David, if you want to show that you can stay till 10, prove that you can stay till 9:30 properly, right? So if I give an extra half an hour, I'll watch it and I think, did that half an hour make any difference? No, I don't know what you're up to when you're out there. And quite frankly, I don't want to know, right? Because I remember the things that I did when I was a kid, and Jesus Christ, it scared me. I never mind what anybody else did, things like that, right? And then it would become 10:30, then 11, and you were actually quite easy to bring up, right? But I could see that you were trapped inside yourself, right? And I realised that that you can't force it, right? Although that my type of personality, that I sort of try to force it, right? So I thought the best thing to do is channel it, right? I'll take him to the gym, right? Leave you alone, right? Now go to the gym with me, I got to the gym with Dad, right? I'd go a couple of times, right? But I felt it was important that you went to the gym on your own, you did things for your own, come down to the pub, right? I'd be waiting there for you, and you'd have your lemon soda, whatever it was.
And to this day, going to the gym is still what I use to channel any negative feeling that I'm feeling. Yeah,
it works. You see what I mean? And this is what I'm saying, right? If I get used gym, use it properly. Use it for the right reasons. Not, I want the girls to see me and my big biceps with a bloody tattoo and things like that.
I mean, that's great, but there's more to the gym than muscles.
Well, exactly. Right? So, and then eventually, right, we're back to nature again. Nature does it, right? So slowly, you don't notice it. It's the same as growing old, right? You don't notice you're growing old, and one day you think, bloody hell, I'm old, right? Even when you try to get up, and your body doesn't respond in the way that it bloody used to, right? So, but you've got to put the effort in, right? And the trouble with a lot of people nowadays, David, is they want everybody else to do it, right? They don't want a cure, they want relief. If you see the difference, right?
Yeah.
They want, I'm feeling bad, I'll take a pill. Right? But as soon as the effect of that pill goes away, right, they need more relief, don't they? Whereas if you cure them, right, they don't need that tablet, and they don't have to come back to you because they're cured. Right? The cure it's an effort. You've got to put in a lot of time. Right? And you think about the time that you put in to get in that state in the first place. Right? You with me? Right? I mean, you're trying to lose weight. You think of all the hours you put in there to put the bloody weight on in the first place. Right? Nobody looks at it that way, do they? Right? And this is everything nowadays. It's always somebody else's fault. And I thought, nothing is anybody else's fault. It's what you do with what happens to you.
So there was an insight into my teenage years and how me and Dad approached my development and my transformation throughout my teenage years. And largely it was a success. And the weight fell off and I gained more confidence and I started to feel comfortable with a circle of friends and how I was at school, and I performed well with my grades, etc. And I got a place at university. But the transformation wasn't complete, not by any stretch. And I still had this mentality and mindset that I was the fat kid, even though I wasn't physically. And these unresolved issues were still doing circles round the back of my unconscious as I moved away. And this is when I started to encounter mental health problems. So we introduce me going away, and Dad talks about the parenting side of things, and reflect a little bit more on the trials and tribulations of adulthood. So that's me through my teenage years. Get through high school about as successfully as any teenager can. Yeah. So then I move away to university. I'm still 17, still young in terms of years and also kind of life experience and personality and stuff like that. How was it being a parent when I moved away again? And again, you're kind of looking on from the sidelines.
Well, there's a kind of feeling of loss, right? But also, you've got to be aware that you've got to let your kids go, right? There's too many parents trying to hold on to their kids, you know. And the best description I have is Gabriel Gibran through there, the book, and he said, "See, the children, right? They come through you, but they're not of you, and they're like arrows that you shoot into the air." Right? And I thought, what a wonderful description. You see, I maintain that a parent's job is to train the child and give the child sufficient instruction, call it what you will, so that so that they can foster their own independence when they leave the home. If they've got to keep on coming back to you, it's not their problem, it's your problem. You failed them. Right? Coming back and asking advice is one thing. Coming back because you need my advice is a totally different thing.
I mean, look at us two. I mean, you had to get cancer for me to come up on the train and see you, so...
Well, exactly.
You made me pretty damn independent.
By the way,
Sorry, I distracted you there.
No. You know me, get me on a bloody soapbox and I'll be here all bloody day. Right? I mean, I thought it was wonderful, and I see other people. I said, one thing I admire about David, he didn't want to go to the university here when he could come home at night. He wanted to be here. He had the sense to know he's far enough removed. He's forced into growing up. Right? He can't turn around and come home and expect his old man to have his bloody tea ready or this ready or all the rest of it ready. If I had to join the army, goodness knows what I'd have earned, yeah? Right? And growing up is actually quite painful, really. Right? But again, it's a process, isn't it? Right? And the first day you try it, you think, what in all God's earth this? Right? But then eventually, when you look back, you think, gee whiz, what a long way I've come. Right? And this is something here, so sometimes when you want to use your gratitude prayer at night, use that, right? To show that, the guidance, right? To have the willpower, the insight, call it what you will, to be able to have moved from there to there under your own steam. Right? Why people have low self-esteem is beyond me. And a lot of the time, people don't suffer from low self-esteem. They suffer from the esteem that they think they should be getting from other people. And if they're not getting it from them, then they suffer from low self-esteem. It is self-esteem. If you've got to, look, if 1 million people like you and you don't like you, how do you think you're going to feel? Answer me.
Pretty bad.
If 1 million people don't like you and you like you, how are you going to feel?
Doesn't matter.
Well, exactly. So that 1 million people, whether they like you, whether they don't like you, should have no bearing whatsoever in it. So be careful what you do to yourself, and try to listen to your inner tune. That's what I try to say to people, right? And I always know when I'm not listening to myself, when I allow other people to persuade me, right? And you think, oh, maybe they're all right, right? Or maybe I'm a bit undecided, and they sway me one way, but I'll soon find out I'm on the wrong path, because that feeling that you get that you were trying to describe later on. You knew that you weren't sure if it was right, but you knew there was something wrong, right? Once you start to get that feeling, right, have a look at what path you're on and think, nah, that's supposed to be here, right? But what actually happens is we allow social conditioning. What will happen if this happens? And we always look and we think, like me with the kids, right? I'll have to go back because of this and all the rest of it. Maybe I made a big mistake going back for my sake. But obviously, when you look back on that, if that hadn't happened, you wouldn't have happened. So obviously, it was intended. Right? So when you look back all these things, that's where regrets. Right? I mean, sometimes you can rue your mistakes, right? But that's the only way you learn. You don't learn from being right. Right? You only learn from being wrong. And everybody doesn't want to be wrong. And I thought that's nonsensical. Right? But if you're wrong, admit it, right? And just say, look, hold up your hand and think, look, I'm wrong. What the hell's wrong with that? It stops all argument. Right? Most arguments are people who are wrong, who know they're wrong, and try to defend themselves, or having a go. Oh, they're right, yeah, I'm wrong this thing, but you remember yesterday, right? And they try to open up the argument because they refuse to sort of look at the truth about themselves. And what the hell's wrong with looking at the truth about yourself? And just say, okay, fair enough.
You were talking a little earlier in that speech about me moving away and having to learn how to cope for myself, and then you moved on to self-esteem. During my time at university, I had some very dark times and a lot of problems with my self-esteem, which caused me to develop first my eating disorder and then the depression. How did you kind of feel looking from afar and kind of realising that something wasn't right with me?
Well, I just thought it was still an extension that you hadn't come to. And I also realised that sometimes as a parent, you've got to stand back and let your kids get hurt for their development, not for your development, right? So you try to stop your kids getting hurt. Oh, don't climb that tree, don't climb that tree. I thought, why not? Well, you might fall. Well, so he doesn't fall, right? He'll never have climbed a tree in his bloody life, right? So I didn't think it would be easy, because you had this kind of antisocial aspect to you, which used to bother me quite a lot. Right? It's something I would sit in a car and you'd pick up a book, right? And I'm sure if I drove from Banbury to London, you would sit that whole distance and never say a word, right? You weren't very good at initiating conversation. You were a yes and no type person, and there was no development. You with me, right? So I just felt that you had to sink or swim when you're there, because if you can't handle it, I can't get involved. It's not my job to get involved in. That's you trying to make your way in the world, not your old man trying to tell you, hey, if you do this, you do that. That's me imposing my ideas of how I would treat the situation. Right? How you treat the situation is for you to work out. Right? So you've just got to stand back and let you work it out. Right? And full credit to you, David, you've worked it out. Right?
I'm a lot better for working it out myself rather than using the help of others.
There's no way you can be better if you don't work it out for you. See the point? If I told you for this, how can you take credit from something that I did for you? Right? You've got to be able to sort of point yourself, like me, right? I thought, curing my fear of the dark. How did I get the courage to go into that worries? Right? Now, I think, God, you was a brave little sod. Right? I wasn't a little, but I thought, I don't think I would have the courage now to do that, right, to be honest. But obviously, right, I must have, because I did it sort of then. Right? But, and then it's exactly the same, a lot of the things that we're frightened of, they actually don't exist, they're only illusions. Right? And it's like a mirage. You think, oh, pool of water up there, and you think, oh, I'm going to have a drink there. You go up there, I think there's no bloody water here. That must have been, that was an illusion. And most of the things that worry us never happen. Right? What happens if? What happens if not? Really?
Okay, so filling in a couple of gaps once again. I progressed through university. I managed to overcome my mental health issues. I graduated. I started my own business. This is the stuff that you guys have probably heard the most, my personal story, how I got into doing what I'm doing. And in the meantime, for my dad, he had actually had a previous instance of cancer in 2012. And this was cancer of the bowel. And he had managed to go through a couple of cycles of chemo and radiotherapy, and he eventually had an operation to remove the tumor, and that was completely successful. And the doctors and the medics had no worries about any future reoccurrence, and they signed him off essentially. But then, of course, he got his second instance of cancer, and this is where I start to ask him to recount the events leading up to this, and then, of course, we explore some existential questions of what it's like to be living with a death sentence. So we pick up about 6 months before I started this interview, when Dad was first diagnosed with cancer. So we're coming near to the present day with that. So you got over that cancer, turned 75 last year.
Yeah.
And then December came round and you got diagnosed with your current cancer. Do you want to describe that experience?
Well, what actually happened was, I got one Sunday morning, the 14th of December, and I was having a wee. Then I thought, oh, I feel a bit dizzy and I feel sick. Right? And I'm never sick, not vomiting type sick. Right? I thought, well, I'll better sit down to have a little bit of rest. So I sat down here in this chair, and then this arm started going funny, and I thought, aye, right? Bad sign, when you get the pins and needles down your arm. Then my chest started getting a bit sore. But I've been having pains in my chest before, but quite frankly, I think it was the fact that I was just bloody 16 stone and walking up bloody hills too fast. Right? Really, right? And but anyway, phoned for the ambulance came and they checked and made sure, you've definitely had a heart attack. But it was a mild heart attack, I found out later on, but I knew that anyway, right? Because nothing's happened since. And whilst I was in there, they gave you a chest x-ray, and they found something in my chest. They gave me an MRI scan, and they came in there, and they said, oh, very sorry, but you've got cancer in your liver and cancer in your lungs. And I thought, okay. The funny thing is, I was lying there in my bed that night, and I had a sense of adventure. And I thought, hey man, they've just told you got cancer, and you're feeling excited about it. Right? And I thought, I'll soon find out if they could, there's a spirit world on that. But I wasn't frightened, disappointed and things like that. And I thought, I was a bit concerned about you, and I thought, Jesus, just at this time of his life. Right? So anyway, the oncologist was supposed to come and see me the next day. He never turned up. The next day he never turned up, so I phoned up Bob, and he came and took me out. Right? Then there was a letter that I had to go in and see him on the 24th of December. And that's when they showed me, said, that shouldn't be there, that shouldn't be there, that shouldn't be there, that shouldn't be there. And this bit were a bit concerned, because it's round about the bile duct, and if it squeezed the bile duct closed, you'll end up having jaundice. Right? And then I asked him, I said, look, I said, can we stop beating about the bush here? I says, I was brought up to believe once it's in your liver, I'd start his other side. It's exactly the phrase I used. Well, yeah. I said, look, how long? And they said, I would give you 6 to 8 months. I thought, bloody hell, 6 to 8 years I can handle, 6 to 8 months, right? He says, but, he says, you're fit and you're strong. That was 6 months ago, right? And we just don't know. We don't know how long it's been there. I thought, well, it's taking you bloody long enough to find out. Right? And the strange thing is, when I was in there, they kept me in for a whole series of tests. Right? And I thought, that's them upstairs again. Give me all these tests. Right? To think, hey Jimbo, right? Something you've got to do about this. Right? And that was it. Right? So I came out of there on a phone ball, and there was a deathly silence. Right? And I swore him to secrecy, but he'd already told his bloody kids. Because I told them in the hospital, I said, look, they found, tumours in my heart and lungs. Of course, Bob's worse than a woman. Yeah, I guess, yeah. So basically, in a nutshell, right, so I decided not to tell you till you'd finished your exams and things. And
so just a final point on the cancer. How have you come to terms with being given 6 to 8 months to live?
Well, I just don't believe it. I mean, to be honest, for the first 2 months, I think I was totally depressed. I was just like a zombie. And I just couldn't get my head round it. Right? If they said a year, a couple of years, but 6 months, I thought, and then I read that book, and you know me, eventually my optimistic nature comes out, and I thought, sod you. And I said to the doctor, when I was down there, and she said to me, you know something, Mr. McRae, you're amazing. That she says, I've never known anybody handle it so well as what you're handling it. I said, well, what am I supposed to do? Do I throw myself down on the floor and beat my legs and things like that, right? I said, look, eventually, right, and this is what I believe that I caused this cancer, right? For some reason, something I did or something I didn't do, or maybe something I did and didn't do, right? But ultimately, I'm responsible for my health. So therefore, if I can learn the lesson, I can do something about it. If I can't learn, I bloody deserve to die, right? That's the way that I actually feel, right? But what you've got to remember is, right, it's 70, well, let's call me 76. Who am I to complain? Really?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
You get your 3 score and 10.
Well, exactly. And I've stolen 6 years from somebody else.
Mm-hmm. So that takes us to the present moment. We've whistle-stop toured through your life as much as possible, and now I've just got a few quick-fire questions on what you think you've learnt from your life. You've done a lot of reflection throughout, so you might end up repeating yourself, but what you think that you've learnt that you can teach to other people. So, question number 1, what is your biggest mistake or regret?
Trying to be something I wasn't.
That's a good with that.
Yeah.
I think that's a lot of people's.
Yeah.
Number 2, this might end up being the same answer. What is the biggest lesson you've learned in life?
That we're equipped with everything we need at birth. We don't need anything new. We must learn how to use all our talents and be able to listen to our inner voice, which will always keep it right. Some people call it conscious, some people call it God. But if you listen to your inner voice, you're nearly always right.
Good answer. Number 3. What 3 things would you recommend that everyone does in their lives?
Live close to nature. Stop competing and measuring themselves against their peer group, whoever they see on television and things like that. And realise how important life is, right? And life meaning life, not existence, right? And to feel feel the benefit that you get from nature. Allow nature to be your doctor, right? And nobody else.
I think we had about 5 or 6 in there, but
Oh,
that's all right.
You can't split it up, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So number 4, how have you stayed motivated for everything you've done in life?
Well, sometimes I haven't. What I notice is the older I get, the less the harder it is to motivate myself. Unless it's something which threatens my inner core, and then once my dander is up, I've got more than sufficient motivation, right, to act in defence of that person. The way that I'm fighting this cancer, for instance, right? So I wasted a lot of motivation chasing rainbows, right? As I said to you before, sitting down on a piece of paper at midday and being a millionaire at midnight, right? But I feel that if you learn, if you learn to trust yourself the way I trust myself, I don't necessarily like all, I mean, don't think that I think that I'm the be all or end all, that I realise I'm flawed, right? But I used to try to get rid of my flaws, and they don't actually matter, right? If you concentrate on what's good about you, the flaws will either be ignored, right, or they will disappear anyway, right? But they're there for a reason. Yeah. Next one.
Number 5, what is your biggest fear for my generation? I think you could give about 10, but
Lack of spirituality, right? And I don't mean religion by that, right? That I feel that the human race is basically spirituality in action at its purest form, and that sheet anchor gives you the basis and the strength to do whatever life calls. If you don't have that, you just sink into a morass of triviality, to be honest, right? Just look around about you. Everything is so trivialized, right? The adverts are so stupid, Adverts used to be quite clever and things like that, right? And and I think, in the space of my lifetime, I'm talking about from the time when I was probably, say, 50 years, the difference in people's astronomical, right? And yet they all think they're so bloody wonderful, right? Outwardly.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
So flipping that on its head for the next question, what is your biggest hope for my generation?
I feel because they lack spirituality, eventually they'll all come to realise what they need to do to get back to what they actually should have been, and always have been since birth. So, and I notice, I remember saying to you about 10 years ago, there's got to be a revolution, and you're going to be at the forefront of it, because your generation can't carry on the way it's going. It will disappear, right? And then eventually there'll be enough people like you and Ross and and probably other people that you know that I don't know, and they're just going to say, look, right, you can't change it until somebody says, look, enough is enough. Then you become beacons of light for these people to follow. That's why I want you to get into this kind of counselling and people like that. Not to brainwash people, but more to just sort of lead them gently, and for them to find out who they are and to trust who they are. So I'm not talking about religion here. Right? I'm just talking, and I see seeds of awareness, and it's we've got to do something about this, right? but there is no direction yet. Eventually, there'll be a bit like maybe, you know, like when Jesus Christ or some of these other great spiritual leaders come, right? There's a time that people need something like that, need some
There's this kind of
guidance.
zeitgeist, isn't there?
Yeah, exactly. Right?
So, you know, I'm all about positivity now, so I'm going to end on a positive note. What is your biggest achievement, of course, apart from having me?
Have the other three. Being able to sort a lot of people out, you know, either through my healing or talking to people like Bob and, you know, and people like that. Even in the army, people coming to me for advice. Right? Why they came to me, I don't know, but they obviously knew. Right? Difficult to actually, yeah, because sometimes I feel I haven't achieved all that much really, right? And this is quite strange, because it's only come to me just as I'm talking to you now. I feel that my big achievement is yet to come, right? Whatever that may be. Yeah.
Ominous.
Yeah. Optimistic, hopefully.
No, I totally agree with that last point. I think everyone nowadays is all about the big gesture and grand schemes and grand designs and let's have a worldwide movement. But I think the everyday kindness that you do, and if everyone did that, the world would be a much better, happier place to live in.
There's only one way to change the world, is to change yourself. Right? And then what actually happens is, you will want people will look at you and they will come to you and say, look, how do you manage? Right? And I was thinking about your counselling, right? You know, so you know, let's just say a girl comes to you with anorexia, right? And again, let's say that you cured her. You didn't just cure her. You cured her mother and father who were probably sick, you know, or gave relief to them. They're sick to death, worry about it. She might have siblings, worried about that. Might have people in the school, children, right? And it spreads like a ripple, just that one person. You might hear, by helping that one person, you've maybe helped 100, 150, 200 people. Right? Now you take that, it doesn't take long for it to filter all its way through the world, right? And if people would stop, this might sound quite strange, be more self-aware but less self-centered. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, not what's in it for me. You know, that I'm not, that's not my job. I thought, why isn't that your job? Just go the extra mile. Right? Just, you know, if you can't help, don't hinder type of thing. And it's so easy. I'll tell you something that I noticed, David. It is a lot better to be generous than it is to be tight-fisted. Right? Yeah, because you give things away, right? And they always get replaced, or something will come back to you, not necessarily from that person. They might betray you, but over here, right, is your reward, whatever it is that you actually do. Right? Mm-hmm. You know, and it's, you know, you're going down the right way, because everything's got to be holistic now, David, right? And the funny thing is, all you got to do is allow, you know, or something else about the walking that I never told you about, is the communion you receive from nature. Right? Because as you're walking along, remember all those levels that, you know, that somewhere down here, unconsciously, nature's communing, you know, with you. And because you're out in nature, there's no bloody phones, right? There's no television, there's no music, there's no earphones blocking you off and things like that. And yeah, and sometimes, yeah, I mean, yeah, I've got tinnitus, yeah, so I've always got noise made. But before that happened, when you were out there, the noise was the silence was deafening. And I really mean that. You think, God almighty, isn't it loud here and quiet? Right? It really is. But you've got to be, yeah, because I think one of the biggest faults that human beings is living in cities. Right? Look what happened here. When you overcrowd rats, they become cannibalistic. That's what actually happened in their cities. they become cannibalistic. The bankers, right? They become the head rats, right? And they cannibalise everybody, right? Look at big business, right? They're no longer a service. Their motto just seems to be, how little can we do for as much as possible? As opposed to how much can we do, right? And get a genuine reward. No, nobody has an objection to profit, but it's a profit at any cost type of thing. And that's why I say to you, you know, look, when you're 22 and you think, bloody hell, I could be on a £10,000 a month, what would you do with it? Wonderful Chinese saying, to have enough is happiness, to have too much is harmful.
And I think that's a wonderful note to finish up on.
Oh, you still that on?
Yeah. You could be saying all sorts there.
Oh, yeah. I thought you'd switched off.
Well, that was a really wonderful interview. I had a lot of fun sitting here and listening to your stories and your wisdom, and I'm sure other people will as well. And I think I can listen to that 100 times over, and on the 101st time, I'm still got to find something new
You always
to help
do,
me
David.
out.
Right? But the thing to do is finding your own truth. Right?
So everyone, that concludes the interview. I would just like to thank you all for taking the time to listen to well, I say me, mainly my dad speaking, and listening to his perspective and his insight. And I really hope that all of you have managed to get something from that. My dad had so many pearls and nuggets of wisdom, and I hope even just one of them has come to you at the right time. And I know for me, when I listen back to this interview, when there's times where I'm doubting myself, or I need to make a decision, or I just need some extra answer, I always seem to find something in there that hits me just at the right time. And that's why this interview means so much to me, because my dad is still helping me even after he's gone. And that's really important to me. And it also means so much to me that I'm able to share him and his perspective and his message with you all. And I'm sure it would mean a lot to him as well, if he was aware of it, because my dad didn't live in the internet age, the globalization age, where you could reach so many people the way that you can now. So I hope that I'm able to do him some justice and show what an incredible life that he's had. So if you guys want to follow me some more, then obviously remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel, check out my website. If any of you are interested in hearing the uncut version of the interview, if aspects of Dad's life really interested you, or you want to hear kind of the full context of things played out, then I do have the full uncut copies of the interview. And you can contact me through my website or social media or my email if you'd like to hear the uncut versions of the interview. But until next time, guys, I just want to say thank you again for taking the time to listen to this interview. And until next time, remember to love inwardly and shine outwardly. David.